if you literally fired every single federal employee tomorrow, that's about $270 billion. It's a big number, but it doesn't even get you to the first billion.
Welcome back. Today, Francis Jackson is a best-selling author as well as an attorney who specializes in disability law for those seeking veterans disability benefits as well as Social Security disability benefits. Today, we're focusing on what is happening in the Veterans Affairs Department. The VA department, I think February 13th, announced that they were dismissing or firing more than 1,000 employees who had served for less than 2 years. And this is according to Senator Patty Murray. And we're talking people who are researchers, people who are working on cancer treatments, opioid addiction, prosthetics, burn pit exposure, you name it. These are vitally important people. And here to walk us through what's happening is again Francis Jackson. Welcome back.
My pleasure, Bert. Always a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you.
Thank you so much for stopping here. I just think this is an incredible thing. You and I have talked about this numerous times. The VA is already struggling. It's already like a lot of government agencies. They're underfunded, undermanned, and the VA is, if I remember correctly, the second largest department in our government. Anyway, so I wanted to bring you on and talk about this. And again, we've heard how Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency are basically gutting the government workforce. How do you see this affecting the VA?
Well, the truth is, Bert, I think it's too soon to tell. It is a bad sign that they're firing anybody at the VA. As you talked about in the beginning, the VA, particularly on the benefits side, is seriously understaffed, and as a result, there's a huge backlog of benefits claims pending. And truthfully, they're understaffed on the healthcare side as well. There was talk at the beginning that VA was going to be exempt from these firings. And it appears that they have exempted at least the direct service professionals, doctors and nurses for the hospitals. Although just because of the general turmoil that's been created in the whole hiring process in the government, some of those folks are getting jammed up as well. But the thing you want to pay attention to is we don't know where this is going. There have been cuts, but the cuts at the VA so far have been much more selective than the cuts in most departments. As you mentioned, they fired over 1,000 people, but there are like 40,000 probationary employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs. There's a total staff of almost 500,000, 486,000 and change at the last count. So the cuts there have been proportionally smaller. And so it's just not clear where this is going in the long run.
Yeah, I think that you make a very valid point there. We're not really sure how this is going to shake up. Let me ask you this, because again, to your point, the Trump administration is at the same time cutting or gutting, seems like everybody, right? Nobody has been left untouched. We have the health department, education department that they want to completely get rid of. It's my goodness. The IRS department, which I'm sure most people are like, oh, less IRS agents, that's great. Unless they owe you money, then it's not so great. But obviously there's a pattern here. And as an attorney, I want to get your opinion on this, because one of the things that I see is this. First of all, when I say Trump is obviously not afraid of litigation. I think this is part of the plan. We're going to fire everybody, and we're going to do everything that we can, and knowing that 80 or 90% of the stuff he does is going to go through the court system. And I think that that's what he is betting on because, again, we already seen the Supreme Court said, hey, he can do whatever he wants. It's all good. Now, doesn't mean that they're going to rule everything in his favor, but I'm getting prepared that we're going to see some new constitutional law when it's all said and done.
I think it's clear, Bert. I think it's very obvious that Trump, doesn't want to be president. Trump wants to be emperor. In fact, there was a great piece on the news the other night, how somebody at the White House had put together a Photoshop thing of Trump with a crown, and they were touting it. I mean, this was not, they were not being sarcastic. They were, oh, Trump is just being the king, and you're right. I mean, that's what he's trying to do.
Well, and I want to remind everybody here that let's look at what happened in Venezuela. So Hugo Chavez, who tried to take over Venezuela by force, was stopped and was put in prison, somehow got out of prison, ran for president, and then dismantled the Venezuelan government once he became president. Just got rid of all the checks and balances, and now we see that Venezuela, from one dictator to the next, their money is worthless, right? I mean, there's tons of YouTube videos where people are taking literally millions of their pesos or whatever, their currency, and they're making hats and different art pieces with it because it's not worth any money.
Right. Maduro, the current dictator, has basically replaced all the people on the election commission, and then when he lost the election, they went ahead and certified that he won. Yeah.
It just seems like kind of a it seems like that is what Trump wants as well, right? I mean, if you guys remember, during the campaign, on more than one occasion, he says, "Hey, once I'm president again, you'll never have to vote again." How did that not alarm some people, right? And then, of course, on Fox News, he did say that he would be a dictator for a day, not more than two, I think is what he said. Again, how is that just not alarming some of our listeners and just good conscious, I don't know, it just boggles the mind.
Think about it, pretty much terrify all of us, but it doesn't seem to bother some people.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, you're correct. All right, let's talk about this. What Trump must, what Trump and Musk declared. Let me rephrase it. So Musk and Trump have declared that they want to cut roughly $7 trillion. I think it's like between 6.5 and $7 trillion from the federal budget. What is your take on this? Because that's a lot of trillions for a budget.
You misplaced the numbers a little bit, Bert. The total budget is 6.8 trillion. And
Okay.
they're proposing to cut 2 million out of it, 2 trillion out of it, excuse me.
Thank you.
And one of the things that that a lot of people don't realize, if you eliminated the entire federal workforce, and I mean literally all of them, fire the FBI, got rid of the courts, sent all the ICE and Border Patrol people home, literally fired every federal employee, that's not $1 trillion, not one. And they're claiming they're going to find two.
Well, I think that again, they want to get rid of the education department. They're looking at what departments they can get rid of. They've shut down U.S. aid. Again, I don't know how many departments they have to get rid of to trim $1 trillion or $2 trillion. Because to your point,
They have to get rid of them all, Bert. They
Yeah.
can't keep any federal employees, and they still don't get to $1 trillion.
that's remarkable. That's remarkable. But again, you're looking at, you're looking at uh, Elon Musk, who has no real, in my opinion, doesn't have a connection with working class people who are, again,
That's
somebody who
putting,
might be working. What's that?
that's putting it mildly. Yeah,
Well, because yeah, absolutely. So here's these guys who are billionaires and millionaires. They're disconnected from what the average person is going through. So you think that they're bothered by the fact that all of a sudden we're having an egg crisis and you're going to be paying 10, 12, $15 an egg or per carton of eggs to them, they don't care. That doesn't affect them one way or the other. It's
that's
certainly
right.
not going to affect the richest man in the world. And so for him to come in and say, we got to gut all these things without thinking about the humanity behind those budgets. Now, again, is there waste in our government? Absolutely. But I bet you a lot of that waste comes from the sweet deals that Congress cuts. I mean, right now, and as far as I know, the some of the biggest industries, sugar, corn, oil, the beef industry, all of these guys get subsidies. These are profitable, massive companies that are involved, and they're getting subsidies. But yet, I haven't heard one thing from the Trump administration about gutting those subsidies.
So, and what's going on when you look at this, I mean, if you stop and actually drill down on this stuff, and the thing is, you start talking trillions of dollars and, you know, those are crazy numbers. Anytime you see one with 12 zeros after it, nobody can really figure out what that means. But if you start looking at what they're doing, I mean, essentially what you've got is, as you said a minute ago, you've got a bunch of millionaires and billionaires who don't want to pay taxes and they're finding ways to cut the government because they want to keep taxes low. That's their goal. So, but you can't do what they're promising without doing some real serious harm. What most people don't seem to pay attention to is out of the $6.8 trillion that comprise the federal budget, 65% of that total, or 4.5 trillion, is Social Security, Medicare, and veterans benefits. That's it. That's all. So that is 4.5 trillion out of the 6.8. And if you throw in the Defense Department, which is another trillion, you know, you now are at 5.5 trillion. So the only way you can meet the Musk Trump goal of cutting 2 trillion from the budget is to cut defense, Medicare, Social Security, or veterans benefits, or some combination thereof. You can't do it any other way. The numbers simply don't work.
And when you think about how scary that is, there's a large percentage of Americans that count on Social Security, that count on Medicare or Medicaid, and not to mention our veterans who count on their benefits from the Department of Defense. And they were promised these things. Put your life on the line, and if you make it back, you're going to have access to medical, you're going to have access to education funds, you're going to have access to housing funds. And now they're saying maybe not. Maybe we're just going to not do any of that. We're not going to honor any of that.
That's what they would have to do to get to a true $2 trillion cut. There's no other way. I mean, and as I said earlier, if you literally fired every single federal employee tomorrow, that's about $270 billion. It's a big number, but it doesn't even get you to the first billion. You know, and that's everything. That's firing the people who are in the Social Security office. That's firing the people at Treasury who send out the Social Security and VA checks. I mean, that's firing every single employee in the entire government, other than the Defense Department.
That is such a crazy thought. It blows me away. So you fire every federal employee except for the defense, and you're still, you know,
You haven't even gotten to half a trillion.
yeah. That
And,
just blows me away.
they're swearing they're gonna get to two. I mean, you can't get to two without cutting into Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits. It can't be done. The math just doesn't work.
And something else that I found interesting is that he fired uh, a bunch of the inspector generals, right? And so I found for those of us who aren't familiar with the inspector general, in this is what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. The inspector generals, one of their first duties is to help monitor fraud and waste. They are the first line, and so when they see waste and when they see fraud, they're the ones that make that report. And it just seems odd to me that for the Department of Government Efficiency and for the Trump administration, who are looking to cut fraud and cut waste, that you will get rid of the first line of waste finders, for lack of better terms.
I think there's some pretty obvious reasons for that. I mean, if you look at the Trump cabinet, which is composed exclusively of millionaires and billionaires, um, those people are not seriously interested in cutting overall government spending. They're interested in extracting the money from the government in ways that they don't get caught for. I mean, Musk alone has billions of dollars of contracts with the federal government through his various enterprises, whether you talk about his SpaceX or the trucks, the electronic trucks from Tesla that he's selling to the State Department. It goes on and on and on. They just don't want anybody looking over their shoulder to see how much they're chiseling, if you'll pardon my being crude about it.
No, I think you hit the nail right on the head. That's the only thing that makes sense. If you're going to get rid of the watchdogs, is because you don't want to be watched. You don't want to be held accountable to the same light that you're holding other people accountable. Let me ask you this: how big is the budget for the Department of Defense?
Defense is about $1 trillion.
Okay.
So call it 15% roughly of the entire national budget.
Yeah, and I tell you what's also kind of interesting that I just found this out. A lot of you guys probably already know this, but to me it was news, and that is if and I believe I'm getting these numbers correct, but bottom line is China. Their standing army is twice as big as ours. Their navy is 2 to 3 times the size of our navy, and so that to me, I found that to be very interesting and alarming. 20% of the illegal aliens that are crossing the border are from China. That was from an investigation that 60 Minutes did. So again, I know there's a lot of focus, a lot of talk about illegal immigrants, and a lot of that is focused on the Latinos, which do come here illegally, but they work hard and they send a lot of money home. We've never had we've never had a Mexican or a Latino who was caught for espionage, but every year we have 4 or 5 Chinese individuals. Some of these are Chinese, some of these are American citizens who have been caught sending information back to China. And when I say American citizens, these are Chinese immigrants who went through the system, became naturalized citizens, but they still are agents of China, and they get caught with espionage again 3 or 4 times a year on a pretty regular basis. So to me, I just find it interesting that there's so much focus on the Latinos. Nothing is mentioned of China, who has a long history of being a bad citizen, just globally being a bad citizen, right? They send toxic food, they send toxic toys, toxic honey, you name it. In my opinion, it seems like China is doing the best they can to become the only power in the world.
I mean, it's clear that the Chinese goal is to become the superpower in the world.
And you cannot underestimate their power because they have literally billions of people at their disposal, and they're not afraid of enlisting people against their will.
That's true.
All right, so let me ask
Do
you.
this
Oh,
or
go
we'll
ahead.
wipe out your family, that kind of stuff.
Say that again.
The Chinese are famous for, do this or we'll wipe out your family kind of approach to persuading people.
Yes, yes. All right, so uh, right now, what is your take? Do we just wait and see what's going to happen? I mean, do we write our senators and our congressmen, our congress people who are basically a lot of them are pro-Trump anyway? So what do we do now? Just wait and see?
Well, I think there are a couple things that need to be done. Obviously, one is to register the extent of our unhappiness with what's going on. And I thought it was very interesting that the volume of calls overloaded the entire network for the House and Senate because so many people were trying to call and complain about what's going on. And Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska posted something on the internet about that, saying, we understand that we're getting a lot of calls, and unfortunately that the system couldn't handle them all, but we're interested in what you have to say. And as you know, Murkowski has been one of the few Republicans who has just stood up and said, "Yeah, I'm not happy with this," and has voted against some of the nominees and so on. But in terms of making a serious response to your question, it seems to me that one of the first things that people have to do if they're not happy with what's going on is look at the 2026 elections. Right now, the Republicans have enough votes barely to control House and Senate. The numbers for the Senate in the 2026 round of elections, there are far more Republicans who are up for re-election than Democrats. So there's some possibility there, but the real potential gain, I think, in terms of trying to restore balance here, is in the House. There are lots of House races that look like they're potentially subject to flipping as people become disaffected with the way things are being done. So I think paying attention to and supporting those folks, both in terms of volunteering and money and so on, is going to become one important thing. I think the other important thing is the courts. This nonsense like Trump's proposal to end birthright citizenship, that's embedded in the Constitution. I don't think even Trump can get away with that. Same with Trump getting a third term. And, it's in the Constitution. I don't think he can get away with it. But as you pointed out earlier, one concern is that the current balance on the Supreme Court requires that someone who is more conservative than some of the others has to vote against these things that Trump is doing in order to actually get a majority. And I think that it's been interesting to watch Justice Gorsuch and Justice Barrett in particular, along with Justice Roberts, I think are not ideologues. They're not, they have conservative views, no question, but I don't think they are willing to just toss the Constitution out the window. There are a couple justices there who I wouldn't say that about, but I do think that ultimately the courts are going to be the primary bulwark against real overuse of executive power. Now, the one thing that is really scary is you've got JD Vance running around and some other people have echoed it, saying, oh, well, we don't care what the courts say, we're just gonna go ahead and do it.
Right.
That's outright revolt. I don't know where that goes. I'm hoping it doesn't go that far. Trump, to this point, at least, has been saying, well, if it was in court, we'll just appeal. We're not, we're gonna do what the courts say. So I'm hoping that will continue, but it does seem to me that one of the things that frustrates people is how slowly the courts move. But I do think ultimately the courts are going to rein in our would-be emperor, but we'll see. That I think is the longer term. But I do think in the shorter term, in most presidencies, not always, but in most presidencies, in the first term, the numbers change in terms of the number of members of that president's party who are reelected. They typically go down. Typically, the incumbent loses either senators or members of the House or both. And my best guess, and that's all it is, I'm not a political expert. My best guess is that you'll see Trump lose the House in 2026. But who knows? He may do things that make people so happy with him that that won't happen. But it wouldn't be my bet.
Right. And as you mentioned before the show started, it is the economy, stupid, right? And it is the number one thing that I think a lot of Americans are concerned about is my income, my ability to buy a house, my taxes. People, the news networks are constantly talking about the disappearing middle class and how much harder it is. And so I think that, to your point, if all of a sudden Trump is able to pull that rabbit out of his hat, then everybody will say, hey, yay, we did the right thing, and this guy's awesome. Let's keep him there going forever. But his idea of taxing by tariffs or managing by tariffs, I think is bad, and I think he does too. So I think he was going to put a tariff on Mexico, and he decided at the last minute no. He was going to put a tariff on Canada. At the last minute, he decided no. I believe he still has a small tariff against China of 10% or something. But I think that he's aware that Mexico and Canada, they'll just retaliate in kind. And all of a sudden, if you think that paying whatever it is, 80 cents for a pound of bananas is high, wait till you're paying $2 for that same pound.
I do think tariffs are going to come back to bite him, and the 25% tax on steel and aluminum. I'm personally convinced that's not going to do good things for the economy. I think the price of cars, for example, is going to go up substantially. But it may be that cooler heads will prevail and he'll back off from those tariffs. But the currently imposed tariff of 25% on steel and aluminum alone, I think, is going to have a significant impact if he goes and continues with the tariffs, and he seems to be in love with the concept. Then I think there's a very good chance that the inflation numbers will go up. As you saw, his first month wasn't great. Nobody knows yet what it's going to look like from here, but I don't see any way that he's going to be able to keep his promise of bringing inflation down and be able to make things more affordable for people with the policy that he's currently pursuing.
And I agree. I think you're right. I think the CEO of Ford basically came out and said the same thing, that taxing our vehicles at 25%, and that's essentially what he's doing. He says you're just making it easier for foreign competition to come into the U.S. And I just
so now now he's putting a tariff on foreign cars. So,
Right.
you know, and I mean, it's not gonna get better, I don't think. But we'll see.
It's not. And like you said, only time will tell because maybe by some miracle something else happens. But managing by tariffs, I think historically has proven to be bad. It's a poor way to manage, and I think that uh, most people uh, don't. Let me rephrase that. I think that most farmers appreciate the people who work for them. And historically, these are individuals who come here illegally. There are a lot of illegals that help pick our crops, but you get rid of all these people, and all of a sudden, all your cost of produce is going to shoot up. During the first Trump administration, when he scared the migrant worker. There was 4 tons of uncollected food in California that just went bad because there was nobody to pick it. And what happens is that if I remember correctly, the farmers were like begging people to come work. We'll pay you 30, 40, $50 an hour. They couldn't get anybody. And what happens is, um, like, not that my kids are spoiled, but I think a lot of our generation, the children or our kids have evolved. They're now doing service projects now or service type work, and so not that picking crops is inherently a bad thing. America was raised on farming. At one point we were feeding the world, and we had such a surplus that we could send food all over. And I think that surplus is going to dry up.
Well, I think certainly there's going to be a problem in getting labor in what we would think of as heavy labor jobs. You know, picking produce, for example, that's tough work. You know, out in the heat and stooping over all day. You know, it's not good stuff. And I think there's going to be a real shortage of people willing to do heavy labor. It's not clear what's going to happen. As you probably have noticed, there's a fight within the Republican Party trying to get Trump's ear between people like Steve Bannon, who are opposed to pretty much any foreign workers, and people like Musk who are saying, "Oh, we need skilled foreign workers. We need the H-1B and those kind of folks." So who knows where that's all going to go? But the thing that people are not paying attention to, I don't think, and I suspect they're going to have to soon, is that there is a disproportionate level of workers available in relation to the older generation that needs the most help. What's going on right now, you have the baby boom generation, and after COVID, most of the folks who were 65 and up, who were still in the labor force, left the labor force. Many of them retired. Sadly, a number died. Others got sick and said, I don't need to do this anymore. And after COVID, if you look at the statistics about what groups came back to the labor force, the group that didn't come back in large part is the 60+ group. So now you've got all these older folks. You've got a relatively small generation behind them. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the sheer numbers of the baby boomers compared to later generations, there just aren't a lot of people there who are workers. And you may have noticed that in the last few years, wages have gone up comparatively, which has put a strain on various kinds of businesses, especially fast foods. But it's, I think, going to get worse because one of the ways that we were offsetting that strain was with immigrants. And if you scare people off from immigrating, and right now they're not making much distinction between legal and illegal immigrants. These roundups, they're scooping up people who are here legally and just waiting for an asylum hearing or whatever. But regardless, if you put a lot of pressure on that segment of the labor force, as you were saying earlier, there's not going to be anybody do the work. And while we're making strides with AI and robotics and so on to fill in some of that deficiency, you can't fill it all fast enough. There's going to be a serious labor shortage, in my opinion, if the Trump administration continues with its current efforts. And they don't seem to be changing course so far. So we'll see. But it seems to me that that's going to become a serious problem.
Well, and to your point, look what's happening in New York. Talk about in your face, in my opinion, in your face corruption, right? So for those who aren't aware, they're prosecuting the mayor of New York for all sorts of corruption and bribery type of indictments. And the Trump administration came in and said, hey, we want to dismiss that case completely, not because of lack of evidence, but just because we can force this mayor to play ball with us. And if you watch the Fox News, where the what do you call it, the border czar basically is just saying, hey, if this guy doesn't play ball with us, I'm going to be at his house. And this is, so you have the border czar, and then you have Mayor Adams, and they're both on Fox News. And the mayor saying, well, they got me. I've capitulated. I have no choice but to do what they want. And it is a very sad interview. And it's just like, wow, there is no line that the administration will not cross.
Yeah, it's sad. And one of the things that has happened is, I'm afraid they're going to be successful in politicizing the Department of Justice. One of the things that happened in the Adams case that we're talking about, a number of senior prosecutors resigned, just said, we can't countenance this kind of stuff. And it is not good when you have the best and brightest people leaving law enforcement. That's not a good thing. But we're just going to have to see where it all goes. As I said, I'm hopeful that the courts will rein this in, but that's a very slow process.
Very slow process. And to your point, the first prosecutor to resign on the Adams case was a Trump appointee, I believe. She's a conservative Republican. I believe the second person who resigned was also a conservative Republican. And I'm grateful that some of these people are saying, hey, this is not what I signed up for. This is not legal. This is not right. And I'm not going to put up with it. It's still a very, what do you call it? A very, it gives me hope. I'll just say it just gives me hope that there's some people out there that are standing up for what's right.
And one of the senior ethics people at Justice just left. I mean, it's not good.
All right, so we're out of time. I want to say thank you so much, Francis Jackson, for stopping by, letting us know what's going to be happening to our brave men and women. It seems like they have a fight in their near future just to get their benefits. If you guys want to know more about Francis Jackson and his team, check out veteransbenefits.com, veteransbenefits.com. Francis, thank you so much for stopping by today.
It's always a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you.